Imagine you are standing in a crowded church, preaching a message of peace, when someone whispers in your ear that your home, with your wife and your baby inside, have just been blown. What is your first instinct? For most of us, it's protection, it's revenge. But for Martin Luther King Jr., in chapter 16 of Jonathan Eig's biography, King Alive, that moment of terror became the first true test of his legacy as a modern founding father. Hello, my name is Kimberly Nambo. For my individual chapter review, I chose to reflect on chapter 16, in which begins with King facing challenges in his personal life and develops his leadership in fight against segregation. This chapter is entered during the ongoing boycott for segregation. In the previous chapter, we learned about the Montgomery bus boycott, which began in 1955, in which Black Americans boycotted the bus to protest segregation laws. Going into this chapter, starting in January 1956, we are introduced to the warning given to the King's family by the explosion in their home. King's family does not receive any justice from the government. Instead, they face accusations. Through this, King continued to seek an end to segregation, with others joining him in the protest. Eventually, the chapter ends with a successful boycott 1 year later. However, even though they won this, it would eventually lead to a greater fight against racism. This section specifically dives into the constant battles that MLK Jr. faced. The theme here centers on the risks he faced while leading the boycott. It started with putting his family in danger, followed by scrutiny by the FBI. In addition, we see other activists joining the movement, but they also face intense risks. King was receiving recognition nationwide. This made his personal life public. Dr. King faced challenges that led him to question the safety of his family. Nonetheless, his wife continued to encourage him to fight for change. With his family's support, King developed into a leader. His leadership role was not only about managing the movement, but also portraying morality. Through various attacks on him and his family, he continued to promote nonviolent protest and forgiveness for all. King's moral standards compared to those of George Washington when King stood before the crowd at his home after the bombing. The crowd was ready to riot, but King calmed them down instead. He said, "We are not advocating violence. We want to love our enemies. I want you to love your enemies." In addition, Washington and King both played safely. They both knew that their revolution would require them to sacrifice their lives. As mentioned earlier, King faced scrutiny from the FBI. The Founding Fathers had to fight against the government. They were both seen as a threat by their government officials. At the beginning of this project, my goal was to prove how King would be compared as a powerful leader, just like the Founding Fathers. I imagined them to be revengeful and fearless. This chapter opened my perspective to taking a personal approach to form a connection between King and the Founding Fathers. We are often asked as business leaders, whether we should use our values and beliefs to make business decisions. The answer is yes. Our values and beliefs are what motivate us to reach a goal. In leadership, we often talk about the psychological safety or the inclusive culture. King's experience in chapter 16 shows us that these aren't just buzzwords. They are built through extreme pressure. He didn't wait for a safe environment to lead. He created safety for others through his own moral consistency. For a modern leader, this means standing by your values, even when the public is pushing back. Throughout the book, we learned that King doubted his own capacity out of fear for himself and his family. However, he had a determination to fight against segregation. This reveals that moral courage is not about being fearless, but about using fear to push forward.